All right, we're live at Radio Row, Dallas, Texas, the Omni. And why don't we bring in a Dallas native, Shehan Jeyarajah, joining us now, CBS Sports. If you don't know his work, you need to know his work. Ivans and I have been talking about this for the last year or two. Shehan, you probably, I think right now you're doing as good a work as anybody writing in college football, man.
Man, that is a true honor. I really appreciate that. And it's great to be with you guys.
So tell us, okay, Texas, you've covered Texas football for a while as well, or really just college football and high school football within the state of Texas. What does it mean, what is the reaction like from people in Texas with the Longhorns joining the SEC?
Well, it's a little mixed, right? Because you do have, one, the Texas fans, of course, thrilled about it. They think that it's going to be a great thing for their program. They think that long-term it increases their ceiling and you get to be a part of the biggest and best conference in college football. Certainly Texas A&M fans a little more mixed on it, right? They had this huge advantage being the SEC team in the state of Texas. And then you do have to take into account the former Big 12 schools, the Baylor, the TCUs, the Texas Techs. Playing Texas every year was such a big part of their identity. So there is a bit of a split, but I think long-term it's going to be a good thing for the state of Texas.
All right, so Sean, I'm going to go immediately ask you. Tyler back here on Rocky Top, and thank you for a few minutes. I have been anti-Texas since the rumors came out while we were at Media Days multiple years ago. I see the divorce from one conference. I see the divorce now from a second conference. I've lived through the perception that Alabama runs the SEC. Go ahead, and I'll take your word for it. I'll make it a direct deposit. Can you give me Texas's word on your behalf? They're not going to come into the Southeastern Conference and be like, get out of the way, losers. This is our conference right now.
Well, I can't tell you that for sure. I'll tell you that much. I do think that what's unique about this situation, and actually for Texas and Oklahoma, they have been at minimum a top 2 dog in every conference they've ever been in, from the Southwest to the Big 8, et cetera, et cetera. This is going to be different. Texas might be a top 3-ish to 5-ish dog in this conference. Oklahoma might be a top 3-ish to 5-ish dog, but they don't have the kind of unchecked power that they had in the Big 12 conference. When you look at the history of these two leagues, I mean, the Big 12, when it was created, it was the first super conference, right? It was the merging of the Southwest and of the Big 8. Well, I think that what quickly came about is that it was Texas, it was Oklahoma, Nebraska to an extent, and everybody else. The SEC, when you look at the way that they branded over the past 30 to 40 years, it's not everybody's SEC. South Carolina, man, you are SEC. Tennessee, you are SEC. Alabama, you are SEC. We are all the same. So I think that a big part of the dynamic coming in is going to be ultimately, the way that the SEC frames itself is that everybody in this league is important. There is nobody who is bigger than the league. And I think long-term, while there are going to be people, there are going to be some very rich donors at the University of Texas who will try to make themselves bigger. I do think ultimately the SEC is the kind of league that can handle this.
Shehan Jeyarajah, CBS Sports, does a fantastic job covering college football. What has stood out to you most from SEC Media Days this week?
Well, it's funny being in Texas because you get so many questions about Texas. And that is the big story coming into the SEC this year. Nick Saban leaving and Texas and Oklahoma joining the league. So it makes sense, but the contingent today for the University of Texas, the media contingent, all the attention was just a completely different animal than it had been really for any other team. And you add on Alabama being today as well. I think that's a big part of it. I think the other thing as well is, there are a lot of programs right now, and I include Tennessee among them, that have kind of quieter and more laid-back coaches than I feel like there have been in recent years, right? I remember back in my last time at SC Media Days was actually in 2018 down in Hoover, and Butch Jones is a little bit of a different animal than Josh Heupel when it comes to the press conference, right? I mean, Billy Napier, a little bit of a quieter guy than Dan Mullen before him, et cetera, et cetera. And so, part of it is that I don't know that there is the Steve Spurrier talker of this group. But also I think that it's like the job has changed so much of being not just a football coach, but a Fortune 500 CEO. This is a political address in a lot of ways. It's not just a press conference. It's not just a way to gain attention for your program. In some ways, you're trying to tamp down attention for your program as well. So it's an interesting dynamic to kind of see the contrast. And I was at a Big 12 last week. Very different vibe because it was a presentation in so many ways. It was a pitch in so many ways to the media to cover us, essentially.
So, Shehan, I'm going to ask because Tennessee fans they're keeping an eye on what's happening in Florida, and nothing would bring more joy to Tennessee fans to continue to see the dumpster fire get larger and hotter in Gainesville, Florida. He said earlier today, he being Billy Napier, Florida's coach, change doesn't happen overnight when talking about his job status. He goes on to say that the work that needs to be done is getting done, and we're on schedule. You just brought up Dan Mullen. His last year, 5 wins. He takes over. Napier does 2 years ago, 6 wins. Last year, 5 wins. When you hear one of Tennessee's biggest football rivals, their head coach say we're on schedule after only 11 wins the last 24 months, what say you about those comments?
Well, it's fascinating, right? Because I do think that they're in a situation where they looked like they might have a top 3 type recruiting class heading into 2024. It ended up being in the 10-11 range. That's a big difference when you're talking about building up this program. You know, you get the quarterback that you want in the door, but at the same time, this is year 3. And certainly Florida's going to be picked probably 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th in the SEC. I don't think that for a program like Florida, that's not success by any means. And you add to it, it's not just the fact that the schedule is hard. It's that there are so many road bumps along the way. You cannot lose to UCF. You cannot lose to Miami. You cannot lose to Florida State. And then, by the way, you get most of the hardest games in the SEC as well. It is just such a nightmare situation to be put in. And I'll tell you what, I thought that Billy Napier was a tremendous hire when it happened. I thought that it would be a bit of a process. But the idea of stripping a program down to the studs and being given 4 years to build it back up, I just don't think that's how life works anymore in the SEC.
Last thing, Shehan Jeyarajah, thank you so much. CBS Sports joins us now. Does a fantastic job covering college football. What are your thoughts on Tennessee, Josh Heupel, the rebuild project that Josh Heupel's taken on with the Vols?
Well, I think it's tremendous. I was looking yesterday, and again, 20 wins in a 2-year stretch for the first time since 2004. I actually think that it's such a testament to Tennessee that in a quote-unquote rebuilding year in some ways, they go and win 9 games and are still very competitive across the board. And now you bring in Nico, right? Now all of a sudden, this program has some legitimate stars. When I look at program building in college football, you know, the first year is kind of a wash. The second year, I think you want to see some progress. The third year, you want to deliver. And in a lot of ways, I think that Josh Heupel has moved even quicker than that. And, you know, last year was sort of the small step back, but you see the consistency happening year over year. And then you add in some of these high-end stars. So, look, the SEC is going to be tough this year, like it is every year. But I do think that Tennessee is one of those programs that has built themselves a floor with the defensive side of the ball, and a player like James Pierce, of course, a defensive end. And I think that, you know, you look at some of the talent they have coming in at wide receiver to play with Nico as well. I mean, they are one of those programs that I don't think you can count out in this league. It's one that I think, you know, they're going to be picked probably, I'd imagine, somewhere in like the 5 to 7 range maybe, but they're one who has the ability to go and crash the party. I look at that game against Oklahoma in week 4 or 5, and that to me is a defining game for both of these programs. Whichever one comes out of that game with a win, I think is going to be the one who starts pushing for 8, 9, 10 wins and has a chance to maybe get into that top group. So I'm excited about what I've seen. But again, like what I have to say more than anything is I am thrilled with the level of consistency that has come to Knoxville.
Shehan Jeyarajah, thank you, man. Really appreciate your time. CBS Sports, if you don't know his work, find his work. It's fantastic. I've
we need to have
been
him
saying,
on again.
yeah, we've been saying for like a year, man.
Anytime.
You were crushing it, sincerely.
I appreciate it, you guys. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot.